And we are now officially live.
Suti everyone, and welcome to our weekly online Dhamma group with Venerable Dhammo, who is joining us from Sri Lanka in the meditation center, which is ready for everyone who is interested in doing a meditation course and doing intensive practice. But also, you can do it online, the at-home course. And today we will continue our study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And before that, we will take together the 5 precepts, which is a tradition we always hold up. And it's also a tradition that was kept by the lay people during the Buddha's time. And so we do that to prepare ourselves for the study, to get into the right mindset, but also to remind ourselves of the basic moral training that's necessary if you practice meditation. So is there anyone in the Discord group who would like to lead the recitation today?
I would like to.
Okay, thank you, Martin. You may go ahead if you're ready.
Ahang bante ti saranena saha pancha silani yachami. Dutiyampi ahang bante ti saranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi ahang bante ti saranena saha pancha silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Isarnagamanang nititang.
Amapante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
ดินนาดานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
Adinnādāna Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
อาเมสุมิจฉาจาราเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
Kāmesu Micchācāra Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
มุสาวาดาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
Musāvāda Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
สุราเมรยะมัจจปมาดัฏฐานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
Surameraya Majja Pamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
อิมานิปัญจสิกขาปดานิสีเลนะสุกติยันติสีเลนะโภคสัมปดาสีเลนะนิบุติยันติตัสมาสีลังวิโสทะเย
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So we will continue now with our readings, which is on page 159 on the physical book, and it should be 169 on the PDF. And before we start reading, just a reminder that if you want to read in the reading group, if you have done at least the at-home course, then please send us a request to speak on stage. We read 2 paragraphs, each person, and we take our time while reading. So we read slowly, carefully, but also we take a pause in between each paragraph. So there can be time for explanations or thinking. And Martin kindly put the reading list in the chat. So today, the first person would be Edith.
Okay. How much learning is necessary? As stated in the commentary that I quoted, it is sufficient to know only that the 5 aggregates are the truth of suffering, that craving is truth of suffering, is truth of the origin of suffering. Here, the 5 aggregates are the 5 aggregates of attachment mentioned in this sutta. I have fully explained above that they are the objects that present themselves at the time of seeing, hearing, etc. I have also dealt comprehensively with the truth of the origin of suffering in the section concerned. Knowing the law of dependent origination in brief, in the great subcommentary on the Visuddhimagga, it is definitely stated that what the Venerable Assaji said, those things casually arisen, the Perfect One thought their cause. Ye Dhamma hetu bhava, te sang hetu tathagato ha, constitutes the law of dependent origination in brief. The commentary on the Vinaya Mahavaga affirms that by the words, those things casually arisen, the Venerable Asaji was referring to the 5 aggregates, otherwise called the truth of suffering. And by the words, the Perfect One thought their cause, he was referring to the truth of the origin of suffering. Thus, it is clear that having learned briefly by hearing about the truth of suffering and the truth of its origin, one has also learned the law of dependent origination in brief. Those who teach that insight meditation is not feasible unless one has mastered the law of dependent origination supported by tables and circular diagrams are therefore going against these words of the commentary and subcommentary and causing great harm to the practice of the religion. Patipati Sasana. In the Chula Tanha Sankhya Sutta, we find the following regarding the brief knowledge to be acquired by learning. Quote, O King of the deities, in this teaching, a bhikkhu has heard that phenomena are not worth adhering to. It means that if a bhikkhu has ever heard that the 5 aggregates that occur at the 6 sense doors every time there is seeing, hearing, etc., should not be regarded as permanent, pleasant, or a self, that they are transitory, unsatisfactory, and not self, then he has sufficient learning, sutta maya jnana, to engage in meditation.
All right, so just as a brief recap, we are on the 4th Noble Truth, talking about the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. That's the 4th Noble Truth. Remember, this is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. And the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma means the teaching of the 4 Noble Truths, so that's the essence of this sutta. The 4th Noble Truth is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, and the path, of course, has 8 parts. It's the Eightfold Noble Path. The first part of the Eightfold Noble Path is right view. So this is what we're on right now. We're still talking about right view. Right view is actually that very knowledge of the 4 Noble Truths, or the realization through observation, not through intellectualization, not through study, but actually seeing for yourself the 4 Noble Truths. That's right view. And so he talks about what part of this do you need to learn in advance? And he, as we talked about last week, he said that you only need to learn about the first 2 suttas, the first 2 truths before you start to practice. The second 2 truths, the 3rd and the 4th truth, are to be realized through the practice. And we talked about how the 4th Noble Truth actually has the path. It is useful to know about these 8 parts, but what we can say is that during meditation you don't contemplate them, you don't pay attention to them during practice. During practice you pay attention to mainly the 1st Noble Truth. You could say the 2nd Noble Truth as well, but only because it's also really just a part of the 5 aggregates, which are the 1st Noble Truth. The 2nd Noble Truth is the exception. It's still part of the 5 aggregates though, so it still is an object of contemplation. This mention of the Chula Tanha Sankhya Sutta I posted the Pali in the Dhamma group discussion channel. It's a very important quote. This is, in the briefest sense, all that a person needs to know, needs to have heard before they start to practice. So it's a very powerful passage where the Buddha says, Bhikkhu no suttang hoti, by a bhikkhu it is heard thus, Sabbe Dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. Sabbe Dhamma, all Dhammas, nalang, indeed not. Nalang, alang is indeed, nalang are indeed not. Abhinivesaya, to be clung to be depended on, to be clung to, basically. And then he says, Evan chitang devanamindo, evanaminda, bhikkhu no suttang hoti. Thus, having heard that sabbe dhamma nalang abhinivesaya, so sabang dhammang abhijanati, he, or that bhikkhu, comes to know fully through by experience all Dhamma. It means the practice by which you come to see the truth for yourself happens after that learning. That learning is the first step. The second step is actually practicing. Sabang Dhammang Abhinyaya, having fully known or experienced all Dhammas fully understood all Dhammas by experience. Sabang Dhammang Parijanati, he completely understands all Dhammas. Having completely understood all Dhammas, yang kinchi vedanang vedeti, whatever that vedana he experiences, sukhang va, dukhang va, adukkama sukhang va, pleasurable feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling, so tasu vedanasu aniccanupassi viharati. He, that bhikkhu, that one who sees the danger in samsara, dwells seeing impermanence in all of those Vedana, all of those feelings. So it means having understood the Dhamma, having seen it for oneself, having understood it completely, fully for themselves, any feeling that arises, they're not attached to pleasant feelings or neutral feelings, and they're not antagonized by unpleasant feelings. Because they see them as impermanent, they see them as aniccanupassi viharati, viraganupassi viharati, sees it with viraga, with dispassion. Nirodhanupassi viharati, dwells seeing dispassion, dwells seeing cessation. Patinissaganupassi viharati, dwells seeing rejection or giving up. And having seen this impermanence, dispassion, cessation, and relinquishing, dwelling in that way, na kinchi loke upadhyati. Na kinchi loke upadhyati is another important phrase to remember. Kinchi means anything, na kinchi means nothing, loke, in the world, upadhyati, again, clings to, or what is upadhyati? Grasps at. And this, why I mention this quote especially, na kinchi loke upadhyati, is because this is also quoted in the Satipatthana Sutta. Something you see the Buddha say in the Satipatthana Sutta. Vineya loke abhijja domanasang nacha kinchi loke upadhyati. He dwells seeing body and body, feelings and feelings, mind and mind, Dhamma as Dhamma, having given up or giving up all greed and anger, attachment and aversion in the world, nacha kinchi loke upadhyati, and not grasping after anything in the world. And then in this sutta here, he says, by not grasping, Na paritasati is not feverish or worried or stressed by, not being stressed by the world or by anything in the world. Achatanyewa parinibayati is goes to complete extinguishing for themselves. And then kina jati usitang brahmacharyang katang karaning naparang itayati itatayati pajanati. Not being feverish and thereby being released completely, quenched for themselves. They know for themselves. Ina jati, birth is cut off. Usitang brahmacharyang, lived is the spiritual life. Katang karaniyang, done is what should be done. Naparang itatayati, there is nothing further here. But this is talking about the very pinnacle of samsara, of existence. Something that most Buddhists only think about like at the top of a mountain, like we think about the top of Mount Everest. Buddhists think about it, many wish for it, many chant wishing for it, but maybe don't in their hearts wish for it. But this is the goal. This is the highest. This is the end. This is where samsara ends. Most Buddhists, even most meditation practitioners, are just trying to get closer to that sort of purity because of the interest in purity itself. It's hard to even grasp, as I've said, the full end of samsara. But because it comes about by purity, or it is the ultimate result of purity, many Buddhists are still attracted to it, even though they may not be able to understand it or comprehend it. Obviously, in our tradition, in our community, this is a big deal, the idea of purity and our pursuit of clarity of mind and purity of mind, and of course the accompanying freedom from suffering that comes with it. Many people in the community are dedicated to going as best they can towards the pinnacle of samsara, the pinnacle of, not samsara, the pinnacle of reality, I guess you could say, where you see that all of samsara is not worth clinging to. But it all comes from this one phrase, and that's the point, is that really all you need to learn is this one phrase, and then you can start on this path all the way to the end of samsara.
The Buddha continued, then that bhikkhu who has learned that much by hearsay knows all phenomena by contemplation and actual experience. Then the Blessed One taught how to attain analytical knowledge of mind and matter, nama rupa richeda nana, etc.
So Namarupa Pariccheda Jnana is the first of the stages of knowledge, and it's the beginning of where we tell people to stop reading, to stop studying. Many people are obsessed with studying. As soon as we're even often loath to mention the names or mention the stages of knowledge, because as soon as you do, a great number of people will be obsessed with and unable to stop themselves from seeking out intellectual knowledge of these things, which can actually be a detriment to their practice. It's recommended that you don't study these stages of knowledge because there's no benefit to intellectually learning them, and it can be a hindrance because, of course, then during practice you're always anticipating and analyzing and comparing to what you've read. It's a real hindrance. Whereas those who haven't learned these things and have focused more on the goal of learning for themselves and trying to pay attention to what they actually experience as opposed to what they've learned. Those people who pay attention to reality will progress much quicker. It's much simpler.
To summarize, number 1, all phenomena are impermanent and satisfactory and non-self. Number 2, there is sufficient learning to engage in meditation. Number 3, through meditation, one can differentiate mind and matter. Number 4, to realize the true nature of impermanence and unsatisfactoriness.
Yeah, we even run into trouble when we have meditators focus on the 3 characteristics, because the meditators will be asking about impermanence, asking about dukkha, anicca, dukkha, anatta, especially non-self. They'll be asking about it and wondering when they're going to see it and asking why they haven't seen it yet and that sort of thing. So it's important to understand when we talk about the 3 characteristics, why they're the 3 characteristics, why they're important, why they're stressed, is simply because they're the reason why nothing, or they're an explanation as to why nothing is worth clinging to. That's it. What is the importance of impermanent? It's just a way of saying it's not something that you would cling to as permanent. It's not something that you would cling to because of its ability to provide stability. So what it means to see impermanence is just to see that this thing is not worth clinging to. What it means to see suffering means to see that this thing is not worth clinging to. What it means to see non-self means to see that this thing is not worth clinging to. So it's the opposite. It's seeing the opposite of what you expected. You expected these things to be stable, satisfying, controllable, me, mine. And when you see that they're not, it turns you off of them. It cultivates, or it evokes dispassion in the mind, where you're no longer keen to seek out, cling to, depend upon, react to your experiences.
The first 2 indicate sufficient learning, sutta maya panya, to proceed to the practice of meditation. The third shows how, by noting each act of seeing, hearing, etc., at the moment of its occurrence, one gains the analytical knowledge of body and mind, nama rupa paricheda jnana, and the knowledge by discerning conditionality, pachaya parigaha jnana, which causes the cause of phenomena such as seeing, hearing, etc. These 2 kinds of knowledge.
Knows, not causes.
Sorry.
Knows the cause of phenomena. You said causes the cause of phenomena.
Oh, sorry. Which knows the cause of phenomena such as seeing, hearing, etc. These 2 kinds of knowledge are called higher wisdom, abhinya panya, being the realization, nata parinya, of the 3 higher knowledges. By the 4th is meant full knowledge of all phenomena and insight into their 3 characteristics, in according with the teaching, to know all things experientially, sabbam dhammam abhinyanya, and to comprehend them, sabbam dhammam parijanati. This constitutes the profound knowledge of realization, tirana parinya, and abandoning, pahana parinya. The main point that I wish to emphasize here is that having just learned through hearing that all phenomena are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self, one has enough learning to strive for arahantship. The assertion that meditation should not be practiced without a comprehensive knowledge of the law of dependent origination contradicts the text of the Chula Tanha Sankhya Sutta, causes demoralization in those intent on the practice of meditation, and is detrimental to the prosperity of the practice of the religion.
You don't see this so much in foreign circles. Like our community probably doesn't have a lot of people for whom this is a problem. The problem we have often is the desire to learn. Foreigners to Buddhism have a much higher desire to learn than, let's say, cultural Buddhists, people who grew up Buddhist. I mean, in general, generally speaking, of course, there are obviously people who do study a lot and study too much. Here in Sri Lanka, it can be a big problem where people study a lot and they know everything but know nothing. And because they know everything, they don't actually practice because they have all the answers already. But mostly in Buddhist circles, you come upon this problem where people are discouraged from meditating because they think you have to learn a lot. And so it's valuable to tell them, you don't have to learn a lot, just come and practice, don't worry about it. To assuage their fears of, oh, I'm not learned enough to meditate. In foreign circles, it's often the opposite. They're not interested in so much in meditating as they are in studying, or even if they're interested in meditating, they're easily diverted by study, where they study far more than they meditate. And so the same advice here applies. There's the same value to this teaching. It's just for another reason, rather than thinking you need to. Be careful of the desire to study. Because again, it can be a distraction and it can be a hindrance, actually, if you study a lot. A good rule of thumb is to have it proportional to your practice. Now, I can't give you a number of hours or minutes or passages, but try and understand that it should be proportionate to how much meditation you do.
Andy, may I please clarify one thing? So if I don't study any of those texts, is that stay okay just to do the meditation, the practice, without even studying it? The reason I ask is, as you know, I grew up in this very Buddhist culture, and if I don't understand those things, and and those people who don't understand, don't study those things, I even treat it like, in some way, my interpretation is very, very immature, low-grade level of Buddhist. So that's one of the reasons I ask. Also, the second reason is because reading those things, sometimes it takes up a lot of time, and instead of focusing on practice. So thank you, Bandy.
A really good example. You're in Myanmar, and this is Mahasi Sayadaw, who would have dealt with similar mindsets of people in Myanmar. Do you say Burma or Myanmar? What is the proper name of the country?
For me, it doesn't matter, but nowadays it is called Myanmar. Thank you, Bandy.
What do you use? How do you say it?
I use Myanmar, Bandy.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
in Myanmar, I've never been to Myanmar, but similar to Sri Lanka, there's a lot of learning, and it's incredible, really, and much appreciated how much learning goes on, for sure. But it is a problem. And it's a problem, the attitude is a problem where people think you have to learn. It is discouraging, if people grew up in a Buddhist culture and don't know what the Four Noble Truths are. not grew up, but grew up Buddhist, let's say. So there are non-Buddhists, of course, in Buddhist cultures, but those who grew up Buddhist but still can't tell you what the Four Noble Truths are, that sort of thing is discouraging. But it's still not necessary. It's actually not really necessary to even know what the Four Noble Truths are. If you just know that all Dhammas are not worth clinging to, that's enough to start meditating. That's the point here. Of course, to start meditating, there's one more thing you have to learn, is how to meditate. And so you have to be given a technique. There's one extra step. Now, for someone who's already ready to become enlightened, they don't really need to be given meditation instruction. It's sufficient to give that message to them and send them on their way, but you're not going to find such a person alive today, I don't think. Anyone who thinks that they're above instruction is most likely just simply deluded. I mean, 99 out of 100 times just deluding themselves. So you do have to learn how to meditate. Given a technique, take a technique, and preferably actually study under a teacher. But you don't have to learn any more as far as the text goes. So Mahasi Sayadaw this is why he's emphasizing this, why he's spending time on this, is because of questions like you've asked, like people like you who have these questions, and or maybe even surprised to learn how little learning is actually necessary.
True, Bandi. This is first time I have ever learned about Mahasi Sayadaw's teaching this particular important aspect of, being a Buddhist. So thank you so much, Bandi.
He was an incredible scholar. He was not one of the top scholars. There were monks who were far more learned than he was, but well, not far more, but who were more learned than he was. But he was well versed. I mean, he wrote in Pali. He wrote commentaries he wrote a sub-commentary to the Visuddhimagga. The entire Visuddhimagga, he wrote a sub-commentary, as far as I understand. I think. Anyway, he wrote many texts, obviously. He wrote many books, including this book. Gave many talks. He was a scholar. So what you can say is that if you are a long-term practitioner, you're dedicated to practicing meditation, you do yourself a disservice, and you do the people around you a disservice to not study. Once you're actually dedicated to the practice, once you've done intensive practice and had really established yourself, it's par for the course, and it goes without, it's expected that you should do study and study to the best of your ability. My teacher, Ajahn Tong, every night he would study. He was always reading every night, reading something, and he made it a habit to study something every night, as I understand. I don't know up until he passed away, but up until I was there, and he was already 80 years old. Into his 90s at least, he was studying every night. And so the other aspect of that is, especially if you're in the position to teach others. So when you see all these teachers who have great knowledge, and you think, oh, well, if they are so dedicated to the study, then probably I should follow their example and study as well. But the fact that they're a teacher is a big part of what necessitates or what instigated their learning, and it's something that necessitates a great depth of learning, far more than a student. So as a student of the teacher, the one thing you shouldn't try to take as an example is all the learning that the teacher has done, because they need it as a teacher. A person who's teaching has to have a breadth of knowledge that goes beyond even their own experience. So any meditator, any practitioner on the path has a certain experience. Their path is only going to be a part of the breadth of the teaching of the Buddha, unless, apart from the Buddha himself, who had this breadth of knowledge, this breadth of experience. Obviously, someone today, even a dedicated and accomplished practitioner, is still only going to have their own path. And this is why in the Visuddhimagga it says, if you want to find a teacher, just finding someone who's enlightened isn't always the best. or it isn't always enough for you as a practitioner, because if they don't have a breadth of knowledge about the Buddha's teaching intellectually, they may not be able to address your problems, which may be different from the problems that they encountered. Now, it's not really that big of a deal. You don't have to, you obviously wouldn't look down on a teacher just because they didn't have great learning or something like that. But it does behoove someone who is in a position to teach, to do a great or a significant amount of study. And so that's the other reason. And something to keep note of as a student, not to be discouraged. Oh, my teacher is so knowledgeable and I'm not. My teacher knows Pali and I don't. Does that mean I have to know Pali? Well, your teacher learned Pali in a way so that you don't have to.
Thank you, Bandi. Thank you very much.
Bante,
Bante, you were first. Go ahead, Edith.
so with the learning, you said that your teacher, Ajahn Tong Sirimangala, was learning the Dhamma, and I was just wondering, like, is there like still things that he needed to learn, you think? Or, I mean, after a while, even the Anguttara is like pretty repetitional in my mind.
So Ajahn Tong was very much dedicated to watta, dedicated to duties. He was dedicated to chanting every day. He was dedicated to very specific traditions. I don't know, very watta. What is watta? Very specific ways of doing things, way of living his life. So he would eat in a certain way. He would set up in a certain way. This is an old tradition in Thailand, but I think in most monastic, in old traditional monastic circles. It's something that you would have learned from your teachers. So teachers pass it on to students, pass on these ways. And so he was very much dedicated to the ways that his teachers did things and following their examples and that sort of thing. So he would do things that he had been taught in the way that he had been taught them. And one of those things was, well, I mean, that may not be exactly why he studied every night, but studying falls into that, into the realm of the things that he did as a sense of duty, I would say. I mean, obviously, I don't know exactly why he did everything, but the way it appeared for a lot of those things was this was his sense of what is right. And so as being that what is right, that's what he did. It wasn't out of desire to learn something new. It was just more out of a sense of this is the right thing to do. He was very good. You know, he's very, very in tune with what is the right thing to do. I mean, no one can ever say whether another person is enlightened or not, but I can't imagine someone who I would think would be more enlightened of all the people I've met in this world than him.
Yes. Thank you.
Bante,
And I mean,
I was
I
gonna
keep saying
ask.
that, of course, I'm biased. Anyone would say this about their teacher, but he wasn't really, like, it's not like I was incredibly close to him. He became so beloved by the people of Thailand. It was, he managed to win the hearts of the most difficult to win people, like monks of the highest class and lay people, rich people, poor people. Everyone who came to him left smiling. It was really remarkable. Like, he was a very, very special person. And obviously people say that sort of thing because they're attached to their teachers, and I would not brush off an accusation that I'm attached to him as a teacher, but it's not out of attachment, I don't think, because what I'm saying is just things that other people said all the time about him. It was really remarkable. But worth noting that what's really worth noting is that when he was 80 years old, he was still studying, and it was a real good example for the rest of us that if we've given up studying, thinking that we've learned enough, well, we're not really following the example of him as our teacher.
Yeah. I was just thinking how the Dharma is like we are studying the same. I mean, in my mind, the Mahasi said it's kind of like the same thing. It can be expounded in very short as well. So the most important things are there in the very little reading, basically. That's what I think and see.
Well, he would use a lot of the things he read each. So he would be teaching. He had a large community, and every morning he would teach the monks something, just 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I recorded a lot of these 5-10 minute talks that he gave in the morning, and if he was there in the evening, he would give another one in the evening. It would be something from the Anguttara Nikaya or something just from some list of things or some topic that he had thought of that day.
Yeah, it can be inspiring or just a reminder of something. Thank you.
Mhm.
Bhante, what would you say for lay people are, or is the main reason for studying? I mean, I would have said to just, let's say in a specific case for someone who's living in a non-Buddhist country environment, to just be more connected with the teachings, even if you have a regular practice. But would you say something different?
Yeah, that's a great reason for sure to remind you, also to be able to check your practice, especially when you're not living in a Buddhist society, in a Buddhist environment, in a meditative environment, to see when you're off track by getting a reminder from the teachings. But the other reason is that you'll encounter people who have questions about the practice. And so even you're not in a position to teach, you're still in a position to explain yourself. And a person without any learning has a hard time explaining what they do or explaining Buddhism, answering questions that people have. So it is a disservice to not be able to answer those questions.
Thank you, Bhante.
If, according to their proposition, meditation could be practiced only after thoroughly mastering the law of dependent origination, together with its explanatory circular diagrams, etc., some people who have no time or opportunity to study the law of dependent origination, or who are slow in learning it comprehensively, are liable to lose the opportunity of gaining the path or its fruition, even if they are endowed with sufficient perfections to attain them. To cite an example, during the time of the Blessed One bhikkhu by the name of Chulapantaka found it difficult to memorize a verse of only 45 syllables, although he tried to for 4 weeks. To learn the whole law of dependent origination extensively would thus have been impossible for him. Yet the same bhikkhu attained arahantship, accomplished in supernormal knowledge and vision, by practicing for 1 morning only a meditation exercise prescribed by the Buddha.
So, first of all, someone who practices mindfulness and has become established in the practice of mindfulness has no potential for misunderstanding or doubting this at all. It's unfathomable to someone who is established in practice of mindfulness that you should somehow need any kind of intellectual learning. Really. And that any kind of intellectual learning could somehow help you, or somehow, let's say, be directly applied to the attainment of the goal of the practice. It falls under the realm of Silabbata Paramasa, attachment to rites and rituals to say you must do this to become enlightened when in fact there's no need, or you can't do this or else you won't become enlightened when in fact there's no need to abstain from that. So this is Silabbata Paramasa. It's one of the things that's eradicated by Sotapanna. It's just unfathomable that, it makes no sense to think, why would you need to learn all of these things? Anyone who says that, you can tell they still have Silabbata Paramasa, this misunderstanding that is cause of a product of the pollutions of the mind. Chulapantaka is a common example. Ajahn Tong would often bring up Chulapantaka because, of course, his teachers like Mahasi Sayadaw also often brought it up. It's a reminder. It's an example that's often used to remind us of this truth that you don't really need to study. So Chulapantaka, there was Mahapantaka and Chulapantaka, and there's a story about and they were, I don't remember what it was, the story of Mahapantaka and Chulapantaka. Anyway, Mahapantaka became an arahant.
Yeah, they were sorry, but I think they were brothers.
Yes, they were brothers. I just don't remember what happened before they ordained. I get them mixed up with Mahapala and Chulapala. Anyway, I'm sure I can look it up and get it, but it's not important. The important part is once they became monks, Mahapala became an arahant. And he had the idea that Chulapantaka should learn this text. And because Chulapantaka couldn't learn this text, just one verse, because he kind of got fed up with him. He said, you can't do anything, at least learn this one verse, and he couldn't do it. The truth of Chulapantaka is that in a past life, he had insulted a Buddha or a Pisheka Buddha, I think. Or he had insulted someone, an arahant maybe, and said you're ridiculed him, something like that. Did something terrible to ridicule an enlightened being. What actually did he do now? I can't remember. Anyway, also in the stories. But Chulapantaka couldn't remember anything. His memory was just terrible. And so his older brother, the arahant, kicked him out, said, in that case, you should just disrobe. My idea is that Mahapantaka said this not out of spite, obviously, because he's supposed to have been an arahant, right? But it was a means to get him to go and talk to the Buddha. Because, of course, to disrobe, he would have to go see the Buddha first. So he went to see the Buddha and he said he was going to disrobe. And the Buddha said, that's not a reason to disrobe. And he gave him a flower. No, he gave him a cloth, sorry. He gave him a cloth. And he said, go and take this cloth and go and stand in the sun. Because the Buddha looked back in Chulapantaka's past and saw that in a past life he had been a king. And as a king, he had been traveling around on his royal elephant in the hot sun and the dusty roads. And he started to sweat. And so he picked up this pristine white cloth, this towel that he was carrying, and he wiped his face with the towel or the cloth. And he looked, when he took it away from his face, he looked at the cloth, and this pristine white cloth had been sullied, obviously, by the dust and the sweat and the grime. And it just struck him. It struck him that everything changes. Nothing lasts forever. I mean, it's such a trivial thing. The cloth obviously didn't represent that at all, really. I mean, it was a pretty trivial thing, but it just it hit him so profoundly. This idea that good things or desirable things don't last. They change. And that stuck with him throughout his life, and it stuck with him. It resonated in his mind. And it was something that was still present as a seed in his mind. And so the Buddha gave him a cloth and said, go stand in the sun and rub this cloth. And all you have to do is remember 2 words, Rajo Haranam. And just say that to yourself, Rajo Haranam, Rajo Haranam. Rajo means dust, and Harana means removing or taking out. And so he went in the sun, and the hot sun, and he started to sweat, and the grime of the sweat and the grime on his hands. As he was rubbing this cloth, Rajo Haranang, the cloth started to become sullied. As the sweat and the oil from his hand, I guess. And it hit him again, this idea of impermanence. But now it was much deeper because he was a Buddhist monk. He had learned how to practice mindfulness meditation, I guess. And he, as a result of that, became an arahant. Not having had to learn anything intellectually.
While giving this discourse on the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, I would like to take this opportunity of cautioning those good, learned persons to refrain from making assertions that may discourage and demoralize those engaged in or intent on the practice of meditation.
If one intends to strive all alone for the practice of meditation, no doubt one needs to have learned extensively all about the aggregates, bases, the elements, the truths, the faculties, and the law of the dependent origination. However, if one is going to work under the guidance of a good, virtuous, learned, and wise teacher, all that one needs to know is that all phenomena are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. It is also sufficient if one has learnt through hearing that the worldling is governed by 2 mundane truths of causal relations, cause and effect, the 5 aggregates, which is the truth of suffering, and craving, which is the truth of origin of suffering. The majority of Burmese Buddhists can be taken to be already equipped with this much knowledge. And even if not, they can pick this up just before starting meditation or during the course of meditation by listening to the discourses of the meditation teacher. There should be no wavering or uncertainty regarding a lack of learning. All that is required is to start practicing meditation in accordance with the instructions given by a reliable, virtuous, learned, and wise teacher. How to embark on the practice of insight meditation has been described in my third discourse in this series. To recapitulate, the practice consists of developing the 3 stages of the path: the basic path, the preliminary path, and the noble path. Developing them leads to Nibbana. Sadhu.
I think we can stop here. It's not much, but I don't know. Okay, thank you everyone for reading then. And we will continue next time with the last paragraph of this chapter. And now we can move on to questions and answers, either from the Discord community through microphone or through the chat. Everyone is welcome to engage in a discussion now. And yeah. Maybe some information for the Q&A, that we encourage everyone to ask sincere questions that might help with their practice. If you're new to this practice, then this is also a good time for asking some of your doubts. Or if you have any questions about the text or comments.
Bante, I have a question. It's not related to the text. It's related to my practice. I am very attached to digital entertainment, and I am struggling with that immensely. And I know that is not good for me to deepen my practice. I did watch your video from 15 years ago, which was specifically addicted to entertainment. And I was wondering if you could, since it's been so long, if you could just address this, or anything that you could share to help me get de-addicted or to understand the addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in an age where addiction has become so strong, where the pathways to addiction have been honed and refined. We use words like instant gratification to describe the fruits of our endeavors as a society to facilitate this sort of addiction. Society has become rife with numerous means to become quickly addicted and to engage quite seamlessly in addiction. And what I'm saying is these platforms that you engage in are designed to encourage addiction. I read recently there's a lawsuit that was won The lawsuit was filed on behalf of a 12-year-old, I think. Some of you probably are aware of this. I guess it was in the news. Who, from an early age, had become addicted, starting with YouTube and Instagram, posting video after video. And I don't know does Instagram have videos? I don't know, videos or photos. And just obsessed with the likes. And it was the quote was, she ended up eventually spending up to 16 hours on Instagram. 16 hours a day on Instagram. I think something like that. 16, can you imagine? 16 hours a day on Instagram. And they won the lawsuit. They won, I guess Facebook owns, or Meta, whatever, owns Instagram. And they had to pay, or they were found guilty or whatever. They were found liable for millions of dollars of damage for this one girl, which opened the floodgates. Anyway, the interesting part of this story is that the conclusion of the jury was that they know and are intentionally making these things more addictive, which is not to vilify these corporations, even though they're obviously evil, or the people involved with them are very much engaged in a lot of evil. But the evil is in us all, and it's as a society, it's as a people, not as a society, as the human race, and as beings living in samsara. This is why Buddhism is spot on. Why the Buddha's direction, why the Four Noble Truths are the Four Noble Truths. They are the Four Noble Truths. There are no other truths more noble or anywhere near as noble as these four, for this reason, because this is it. This is the condition. So I haven't actually helped you at all, but it is worth pointing that out. Now, getting on to how you can actually, practically speaking, free yourself from this. There are ways. You can take, for example, the 12-step program. Apparently does wonders for people who are involved in addiction. So you can apply the principles of the 12-step program. Is that what it's called? 12-step, whatever it's called. And apply them to Buddhist practice, like not all of them, but you can get the idea of why they're so effective and have steps for yourself, Like this is just practical, not something that's in the texts, not something that's actual Buddhism, but a means, a program, a plan for you to apply Buddhism. I think we would alter the gist of, or the thrust of the 12-step program to include intensive meditation practice, because I think a big part of it and a big part of the answer is find a way to do intensive practice. But we're at a point where it's so difficult to break free. I don't have an easy answer for you, simply because many people in modern times are just not going to make it. They're just not going to free themselves from addiction, not in this life. So you have to understand that you may not live up to the standards set by those who encourage sotapanna, to attain sotapanna. Many people who even undertake meditation practice, even many people who undertake intensive meditation practice, will not be able to reach sotapanna. And many, it's not most of the people who undertake intensive practice do succeed. I would say the majority, but there is a large minority who even through that require long-term dedication. It's based on past life, karma, and it's based on your state in this life. If you're addicted very deeply to things, you may not be able to make it all the way in this life. And that's kind of scary. But it's just realistic. It's important to appreciate that there's no magic and there's no quick fix. Nothing is going to help you jump from where you are to the goal. If where you are is very far from the goal, it just means it's going to take time. There's no shortcuts. So the encouraging part after the discouraging state of feeling like it might be hopeless and I'm just unable to break free from addiction. First of all, you can speed it up by doing intensive practice. It's why it's the biggest thing that we recommend if you're interested in attaining peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. There's really no better way or no comparable way than to taking intensive practice under a teacher at a dedicated meditation center. But when you're not able to do that, the source of encouragement is to understand that every moment of mindfulness is like planting a seed. It doesn't go to waste, even though it might seem lost in this sea of craving, the sea of attachment. And your mind is so much dedicated to the objects of the sense, so much dedicated to addiction, the objects of addiction, to entertainment, to pleasure, to sensuality. But it's not lost. Even these sessions that we have here, especially if you take these sessions as an opportunity to practice the Buddha's teaching, it's an opportunity to be reminded of the importance of mindfulness. So you can take this opportunity that we're here together to apply the teachings, to actually be mindful here and now as we're sitting together, because you're reminded of it as we talk about the Four Noble Truths, as we talk about the practice that allows you to see the Four Noble Truths. It's a constant reminder to be mindful. Even just the good deeds that you do, being kind to others, being generous, the good deeds of being ethical, abstaining from killing, from stealing, from cheating, from lying, from taking drugs and alcohol. There's a reason why these 5 precepts are stressed and emphasized, is because if you're not breaking them, a lot of the evil things you do are not really that significant, or not on the level that you should really beat yourself up over them. You shouldn't hate yourself because you're addicted to entertainment. You should be concerned if you're killing, if you're addicted to killing, addicted to stealing. There are people of this sort, and this is a real dire circumstance. And these sorts of people, it's highly unlikely. It's a very rare case where someone who's addicted to breaking the 5 precepts is going to find great success in the practice. But if they reform, or even if they don't reform, still, any small good deed that they do doesn't go to waste. Like Chulapantaka, just that one instance as a king in some ancient, far, long ago time, stuck with him. Especially those in our community, those in this community are privileged by the actual practice of the 4 Satipatthana, which many Buddhists even don't undertake. Through the practice of Satipatthana, every moment you're able to accomplish clarity, purity, and a seed. You're able to plant a seed that will, over time, bear fruit. So in summary, I would say, first, if you can, find a way to do intensive practice. Obviously, if you're at a meditation center, you're not able to. It's like a withdrawal center, a rehab center, Same kind of idea. Second, do whatever you can to find ways to set up a program for yourself, take steps, structure your life in such a way that you're able to overcome addiction, get help from other people, that sort of thing. And third, ultimately, don't be discouraged and don't beat yourself up just because you're imperfect and because you don't live up to this standard of keeping the 8 precepts or of being pure like an arahant or that sort of thing. And be reassured by the fact that none of what you do, none of the good that you do goes to waste, which can encourage you to do more good, which can encourage you to even take the leap to do a meditation course. We have an at-home meditation course. We've done that, and once you've done that, we have intensive meditation courses. Now you've done both, so
Thank you,
you've done
Bhante.
great good, and you have that great foundation. It's just a matter of being patient and dedicated. You need 2 things in general in this practice. One is patience, because it takes time no matter what, and it's something that comes in its own time. It's not something you can rush along. With impatience, it gets harder and it gets slower. And the other is dedication. If you just stop practicing, if you give up the practice, if you're not dedicated, if you don't keep applying it, then obviously you get dragged back into the realm of samsara.
Thank you, Bhante. Very much appreciated.
I just want to say thank you for the question and thank you, Bhante, for that answer, because I think another Buddhist answer would have been to not blame the internet, the phone, the society, and whatever, and that it's all something, basically, it's all our own fault, but that would be a bit mean, because I heard some kind of answer like that already. And I'm grateful that you put it into this perspective, that it's really a much bigger issue than just deal with it on your own, because it's not the phone, which is basically the truth, but it doesn't make a big difference to say it.
Bhante, here's the first question that we have from the spreadsheet. Can swimming mindfully be considered meditation? Left hand goes thus, right hand, or would that be considered playing in the water?
Well, if you're not doing formal practice, you probably don't want to say left hand goes thus, right hand goes thus, but you can say right, left, or swimming even. But things like swimming or run, jogging, or that sort of thing, it's just a general sense of what you're doing is sufficient. It's difficult to really catch every little thing and to have a really sharp focus, but you can certainly say to yourself, jogging, running. Swimming. If you get good at it, you can probably say pushing, pulling, and so on. Being aware of the individual movements. But don't make too much of it. The reason we say stepping right, stepping left is because we're walking very slowly. And it's slow enough to be able to see the beginning, the middle, and the end of each experience. So it wouldn't be formal meditation. It wouldn't be a very good object of formal meditation, but certainly it's a very valid situation to cultivate informal meditation or informal mindfulness.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. Apart from practicing vipassana, what would be the best way to use my time?
Well, the very best way would be teaching vipassana and studying vipassana. Because those are the only two other things that you could consider to be the best use of your time. So, if you want to find a way to do those two things, those are the two other things that you should engage in. The other things that are, well, less good are also good, and that's, of course, keeping ethical precepts is a formal requirement for practice, but also being generous and kind and helping others. That's another good use of your time. So honestly, none of those things that I mentioned really compare to actually practice. So if you've got extra time and you're wondering what to do with it, the answer is probably you should just do more practice.
Bhante, here is the next question. How do lay people best handle money?
There's nothing special you need to do about money. Money is physically dirty, a lot of germs, so be careful about that. But that's not really a big deal. I mean, it's a concern. You don't want to get sick. It makes it harder to live your life, obviously harder to meditate. But there's nothing special to say about money. Money isn't the problem. The problem is attachment or greed. I guess I could say that if you're having trouble with money, very Mongol organization, I don't know if I'm even allowed, I'm probably not allowed to say this, but Sri Mongol organization is probably pretty good. I mean, it's not benefiting me or anything, but like as an example, our organization does a good job with money. I was just thinking this today because I was thinking, wow, all this money that's gone into this new meditation hall for meditators. Sri Mongol really is using money well. So you could discuss it with Sri Mongol, I guess is all I would say. So reach out to Sri Mongol and see what they do with money, because they're doing good things with money. Not to benefit me, not from really to benefit me. but to benefit meditators, people interested in practicing meditation.
Bhante, here's the next question that we have. I sit for an hour a day. I am trying to make it to 2 hours, but at 60 minutes, the pain in my legs is quite intense, and it is hard to notice thoughts. Can I interrupt my practice to alleviate it?
I would never recommend practicing for a whole hour at once. If you're only, I sit for an hour a day. I'm guessing you're probably not even practicing our tradition. So first thing I would do is recommend, if you're interested in what we do, to read our booklet on how to meditate. I mean, if you are practicing our tradition, then you're doing something wrong, because it should never be just sitting. It should always be walking first, followed by sitting, half and half. I would recommend to practice twice a day if you've got that much time, rather than practicing all at once. So something like 30-30 in the morning and 30-30 in the evening is the maximum I would recommend. If you have more time, add a third session. And if you start adding a third session, then you can start to increase it. You can go up to 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting, but if you do that once or twice a day, it can be really difficult. But I would never ever recommend sitting for more than an hour. You should be doing walking first, followed by sitting. That's not even just in our tradition. The Buddha himself said, I mean, the reason why we do it is because the Buddha said, how does one be diligent in the practice? They do walking and sitting in alternation throughout the day. He never said just sit all day. Something that a lot of Buddhists aren't aware of. The Buddha, in several places, described, in the only place where he described a full schedule of daily practice, he said walking and sitting in alternation. He never said sitting all day. I mean, there are times where he'd mentioned sitting for long periods, and it certainly is a practice, but it's not what he recommended. The Buddha rarely gave details on schedules for practice or routines for practice. But the time when he did, this is what he said: walking and sitting all day in alternation. That's why we do walking and sitting. It's from the Buddha, not we didn't just make it up. A good example, this question is a good example of why. Because sitting all the time is not the best use of your time, not the best way to apply the Buddha's teaching. That being said, when there is pain, you should also note the pain. I mean, again, I'm not even sure that you're practicing our tradition, but read our booklet, maybe it will help.
Bhante, here's the next question. As a narcoleptic, falling asleep while sitting, eating, etc., should I try standing or walking meditation instead?
Standing can be good. Walking can be good. You can also try to doesn't mean you should give up sitting. You can try to face the experiences. I don't know what narcolepsy actually is physically, or what is its relationship to the meditation, but it may very well be that you can apply mindfulness, it can alleviate the condition. I don't know, maybe it can't. I really have no experience with narcolepsy or real knowledge about its nature, but something to look into anyway, to see whether that's a possibility. That if and often these are sort of things or possibilities that doctors aren't even aware of, because they will have been taught something from the books based on people who didn't meditate. So the studies show X, Y, and Z, but meditation might show something different. So you can apply sitting meditation and try to note if you're tired, if you can catch it. And at the very least, when you wake up again, you just continue meditating. No real loss.
Bhante, here's the next question that we have. Must one cut ties with family and old friends to seek seclusion in the forest and practice? Will it happen naturally? These feel like karma from a previous life that won't go away.
Yeah, well, it's another aspect of non-self. You can't control the people you're associated with. Just really doesn't work. And if you try to, you just create more stress and suffering and bad karma, in fact. What you will find is that as you become more mindful, you gravitate towards certain types of people and they gravitate towards you, and others are repelled. It just happens naturally. So I mean, it's not something mysterious. It's just the way of things. People will be attracted to people they're attracted to. And if you're very mindful, only a certain type of person is going to be attracted to you. I mean, I'm not talking about romantic attraction, but just general interest. Nobody wants to be around someone who's mindful if they're themselves not mindful. It's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable, boring, A lot of people will naturally lose interest because they're seeking out people who are desirable, who are people who are fun and entertaining. You lose a lot of those people just by being mindful. But you'll gain people. It's remarkable how often the people who you paid very little attention to in your life, just random acquaintances, will suddenly become good friends after you start meditating. You suddenly find connections where you really didn't think there was a connection, because who you were before and who you are after you practice course is often quite different. And so people after doing meditation courses will often be able to experience this, and they should experience it. They should be ready for it and acknowledge the necessity to change. You shouldn't cling to old friends trying to make it work. You should acknowledge when your paths are just different. You don't have to go back. It's a mistake to go back to your life and try to bring the meditation to all the people who you were close with, family, friends. You're better rather to pay attention to those people who are interested, even if they aren't the sort of people who you would have been interested in yourself before, or close to yourself before. And as a result, your friend group changes. Is it necessary to give up family? So the answer is really no. It's often necessary to take a break, but you don't really cut ties, not permanently. The cutting of ties just comes over time. as you head in different directions. I think it's a mistake to, I mean, I've already said this, but specifically it's a mistake to think that family is important, and it's important that you keep connections to family. Obviously, for some people, that's not going to work at all. Family members who are engaged in breaking the 5 precepts is a big one. You know, how could you stay connected or close to people who are breaking the 5 precepts regularly? It doesn't matter if they're family. Family is not as meaningful as we make it out to be, because this life is not that meaningful. This life is just a blip in the link in the infinite time of samsara. So there are parents in this life, but really everyone's been our parents at one time or another. There are family in this life. I mean, what we say about parents specifically is they've done us a great service, and they've done something very powerful in our favor to give us life, and often to support us, not always, but often to support us throughout our childhood, to teach us things, to care for us, to bathe us, to clothe us, to feed us. So that's a big deal. So we try to return that out of gratitude. And that's a big thing about family, why you don't cut connections. The biggest reason is out of gratitude. Your family has generally often done good things for you, no matter how unmindful they may be. To the extent that they've done good things for you, being grateful and helpful and thoughtful to try and pay them back is an important part of your practice. Now, some people will say, my family did nothing for me, and they've been terrible and awful and traumatized me. So often the only solution is just, yes, to let them go. But again, that just comes naturally through being mindful. It's not about chasing them away, running away from them, that sort of thing.
Bhante, here's the next question. Would you recommend noting the emotion or the bodily feeling that comes with the emotion, but often lasts much longer, in my experience?
You should note the emotion first until it's gone, and then continue by noting the bodily feelings. You don't have to note them forever. The only feelings that you try to note until they go away is pain, pleasure, and calm. Those are called Vedana. If you feel pain, if you feel pleasure, if you feel calm, try and note that until it goes away. But even with that, the first you should note the emotion if you like it or dislike it.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Is it possible to be mindful while in intense emotional pain or discomfort? or physical discomfort, such as a bad case of COVID?
More possible with physical, with the mental, or as you say, emotional pain, discomfort. See, the thing is, those are contrary to, or they're kind of at the other end of the spectrum, being mindful. Someone who gives rise to extreme emotional displeasure, discomfort, is not someone who is well trained in mindfulness. Right? So it's not really possible to be very mindful when those things arise, simply because if they're arising, it's a sign that you're not very mindful or you're not very developed in mindfulness. So rather, you chip away at it. And over time, you become the sort of person who isn't strongly emotionally triggered by experiences. And slowly, slowly, you're just much more mindful, and those triggerings happen less and less. But for the physical stuff, yes, obviously, a person who is very proficient in mindfulness is going to be able to apply mindfulness to so many things, that going to be able to face so many things mindfully that others would be devastated by and overwhelmed by. It's just training. But that's the greatness of the training. That's what the value of the training is, the ability to face anything, the ability to be independent, not be vulnerable or dependent on anything.
Bante, here's the next question. I can understand spending 16 hours on Instagram. It does have videos. I'm another who cannot seem to separate myself from my phone, from social media. Is it possible to use them mindfully?
I think if you're very mindful, you're not going to be inclined to spend so much time on these platforms. There's not really any benefit or value to it. Again, it's the same sort of answer. It's not that you would do it mindfully, you just would not do it. The reasons for doing it are unmindfulness. That being said, again, chipping away, any moment that you can be mindful is a valuable one. Even when you're indulging in pleasure, to be noting the pleasure, noting the liking, is not without value. In fact, it has great value. And over time will change the way you look at that pleasure, the way you look at that desire. But it's worth acknowledging that these things are set up as traps. They're set up to entrap. They're set up to entice. That's the whole purpose. I mean, people would even say, what's wrong with that, right? That's the whole point. That's the greatness of these things, is that they bring us great pleasure. They bring us great joy. But they don't, because another thing this story mentioned was about how it leads to this girl, I think, was suicidal. You know, all the pleasure she had gotten from those 16 hours a day made her suicidal. Not surprising from a Buddhist perspective, but certainly not the fairy tale that we're taught, the fairy tale of social media. fairy tale of sensual pleasure.
Ante, here's the next question. The only teachers near me are Mahayana or Zen. Can I take some of their advice and guidance and reject others? I also use your at-home course. May I use both meditations, the one at the monastery and yours?
It's not really recommended. It won't really work for the at-home course. See, with the at-home course, you're expected to try and be mindful throughout the day. It means when you're not engaged in formal practice, that you're also trying your best to apply the teachings whenever you can. So if you have time, dedicate to that. I wouldn't say it's forbidden. I wouldn't forbid it. But if you came to do an intensive course at our center, we forbid, obviously, practicing anything but what we're teaching. But that's because you're trying to do it intensively many hours a day. But I don't think it's really to your benefit to practice other meditation techniques because you're diluting both of them. You're diluting them. You're trying to train in two different ways, and your mind isn't going to easily be able to pick up either as a habit. So it's not really to your benefit. It's better that you practice one. I'm not sure why you'd need more advice. It might be an attachment to or craving for more advice that's taking place. Remember, all the advice you need is Sabbe Dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. All Dhammas are not worth clinging to. That's all you need to keep in mind. And you apply the practice, apply mindfulness. And that's it. Then you'll see all Dhammas. You'll see them clearly. I guess it's true that having community and having a connection with someone you can talk to is valuable. And I'm not able to be there for everyone all the time. So you take what you can get. If you have someone who a teacher in your community that you find valuable to listen to, I think even going to see a therapist is of value. I was talking about a relative about this, a relative who's not interested really in meditation, but having some mental issues. I said, well, they should just go see a therapist. I really do think it's valuable. And valuable in a way that I'm not, valuable in a way that what we teach, what we offer is not. Because we don't give you that much of our time. Nobody in this tradition is going to take the time that a therapist is going to take. And that's what they're doing. They're taking time to listen to you. You're paying them to listen to your problems. So yeah, if you can find someone to talk to, even if it's someone in another tradition, someone in your area, that's great. Could be valuable. Could also be problematic because, of course, other traditions are going to have other ideas and they might say bad things about our tradition and that sort of thing. I would say it's of limited value in the end because of the difference of opinion. The therapist might be more valuable because they tend to be neutral. Many therapists are open to mindfulness and interested in mindfulness even. But I don't suppose that's what the answer you're looking for. So I'm not suggesting for you particularly, but people might want to consider if they have issues. Like if you have issues with addiction, that's a good answer, really. Like for the person who asked about addiction, for the other person, for the people who are acknowledging this, go see a therapist. If you've got money, got a little bit of money, go see a therapist. I really think it could probably help. They will help set up a plan for you, someone to talk to every week. Probably pretty valuable.
Bhante, here's the next question that we have. I think I'm not able to both listen to a Dhamma talk and practice by noting hearing. I lose a lot of details. I have Asperger's and ADHD. Would you still recommend noting as the number one priority while listening to the Dhamma?
It still is the best way. I wouldn't worry too much about catching the details. If you heard Sabbe Dhamma Nalang Biniwe Saya, you've heard enough. Doesn't mean you should ignore everything that's said or there's not value in learning the teachings that have been said, but there's much less value in learning intellectually. I wouldn't say that you probably lose a lot more by being mindful than you would by not being mindful. Because by not being mindful, you still zone out, right? You still get distracted, especially if you have ADHD. So it's not like just listening intellectually, but being determined not to be mindful is going to be better. The goal of listening to a Dhamma talk should never be to capture every word of it. The goal should be to put it into practice and to use it as a means of cultivating better practice.
Bhante, here is the next question that we have. What bad habits should we be on the lookout for if we practice a lot without a teacher?
Well, there's not such a danger in the practice of mindfulness. With mindfulness, what happens is you might, without a teacher, you might slack off. So the worst thing is you practice less. That being said, there is any number of potential bad habits you can pick up. And they all just involve not being mindful of some specific thing. Well, there's others where, in rare cases, someone starts to note things that one shouldn't note. In other words, notes things that they're not actually experiencing. But this is less common, especially in those who have practiced intensively or done foundational practice. But for some people, they'll note things like things that they want to happen. So they'll say calm because they want to be calm. So that's a bad habit, but that's pretty extreme. And I mean, absolutely, it's not to trivialize it. If that happens, that's a big deal. That's really bad. So don't ever do that. Don't ever note because you want something to happen or try to make something happen or to change something. That's just the basics of mindfulness. More common is not noting something. So you stop noting pleasure, you stop noting calm. Not noting calm is a common one. Your mind gets very quiet and you don't say quiet. Quiet is a really common bad habit. It's just not realizing that, oh, you can also note quiet. It's a really common problem that people have. They'll say, I practice for a while, but then there's just nothing to note. What do I do? What do I do? You note quiet. And then you'll see it disappears and something else comes. There are rare cases where piti can become a problem, rapture, where you're noting something, but it keeps happening. So you may be rocking back and forth and you note it. But the problem is there's a subtle attachment to it, nikanti, this subtle liking of it. And so even when you note, you're not really being objective about it. And so in those cases, yeah, you should tell yourself to stop. You should just say to yourself, stop. But it's not a really big deal. Piti is not a terrible thing. Just try and note if you like it. Honestly, with mindfulness, I wouldn't be too concerned about developing bad habits, though. As I said, it's much more a problem with other types of meditation. Samatha meditation can be quite dangerous without a teacher because it's dealing with concepts which are infinite and of infinite nature. Reality is not infinite. Reality is finite. And ultimately, the types of things you can experience are very finite, very few. So as long as you're focused on them, there's not really any huge bad habits you're likely to develop.
Bante, it looks like we have time for one more question, so this will be the last question for today. I seem to have a strong tendency to lust. I have been forcing myself to maintain celibacy for some time, but I am plagued by lust throughout the day. It is mental torture. Is this bad practice? I have been noting the lust and the bad withdrawal feelings, but the lust and wanting are incessant.
Not terrible. No, if you're able to do that, it will slowly teach you dispassion. You'll get tired of it. You'll start to get tired of the fact that you can't get rid of the lust, you can't get rid of the desire. It starts off by trying to get rid of it. You figure that you can do this and it will just go away. But that's not how it works. It only goes away when you get tired of it. And getting tired means getting tired of trying to fight it. So, sorry, not quite trying to fight it, but getting tired of being upset by it or being averse to it. So you just get tired of it in general, and getting tired of things is the opposite of being lustful or lusting after things. So the lust decreases the more you get tired of it. Really, you're doing all you have to do. Just be patient.
Thank you, Bhante. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for your guidance during the reading and answering everyone's questions. I like to express my gratefulness for your wisdom and sharing the Dhamma with us. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the volunteers who made this session possible. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Much appreciation. Much appreciation for the practice, for each of your practices. These sessions are spiritual practice. Remember, I quoted that sutta, Vusitang Brahmacharyang, lived as the spiritual life. Well, this is the spiritual life. Don't trivialize this experience as just some intellectual study group where we're here to study something intellectually. This is a spiritual practice. We're undergoing spiritual journey. This is a spiritual may not be the best word. It's religious. I like the word religious, though it's still, for most people, it means something very different. Brahmacharya, the holy. This is holy. Or you could say the ultimate. That which is concerned with the ultimate. What we do here is something that should have a profound effect on our psyche. Changes who we are as beings. Us being here to study the Dhamma, to share the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma. We're cultivating that which is of ultimate concern. We're cultivating wisdom. Wisdom to see that nothing is worth clinging to. That the things that we see as stable are not stable. Things that we see as satisfying or not satisfying. The things that we see are me or as me or mine or under my control or none of those things. There's depth of value to what's being practiced here. Even just asking a question on the Dhamma is something so profound. We're following in the Buddha's footsteps. We're doing something very profound and meaningful with great depth. So much appreciation for the practice, for everyone's practice on these occasions. Just think we can all think about each other and think about all the people engaged in these sessions, and we can rejoice and think of how good this is for each and every one of them, and how much goodness is being created by this interest in Mahasi Sayadaw's teachings, and by extension in the Buddha's teachings, the teachings of a fully enlightened Buddha. All these people, me and all these people, are engaging in study, sharing, and practice of these teachings. Much appreciation for all that. For the power of all of the goodness that has been performed by each and every one of us on this occasion. along with all the good deeds from this life and past lives, and the power of the Buddha, the power of the Dhamma, the power of the Sangha. May all of these things protect and guide you, keep you free from sorrow and sadness and pain and suffering, danger and enmity, sickness and disease, and all kinds of bad fortune, misfortune, all kinds of loss, all kinds of trouble. May you all live long, healthy, happy lives with the strength to face all of the challenges that might come your way. May your minds be dedicated to the cultivation of ethics, concentration, and wisdom in this life and in all future lives. May you find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering in this life, in the next life, and in all lives to come, and ultimately find the true freedom from suffering that is the highest happiness, the highest peace, the path of fruition and the final attainment of Nibbana. Sadhu.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu.
sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.